Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Unfuck Your Money podcast. My name is Nadz. I am a somatic healing practitioner and a money coach. Today, I've got a special guest with me, Veronica Rottman. I'm really weird with certain V words because my mother tongue in Arabic, we don't have the V. So words like Veronica, vulnerable, they take like I need to think before I say them. So I'm sorry. Veronica Rottman is here with me on the Unfuck Your Money show. Welcome to the show. Welcome, welcome. How's it going?
Yeah, good. It's so nice to be here with you, Nadine.
So tell us about what's turning you on in life these days. I know we're recording this January 2025. Things are a little bit shaky, weird, but glimmers are important. So what's turning you on in life these days, Veronica?
I really appreciate starting off on this page because I think that the general consensus is that we need to be totally overwhelmed and exhausted right now. And I actually don't subscribe to that idea. I actually think we really need to be embodying pleasure in order for things to move forward. So thank you.
Mhm.
I mean, I have a long list, but if I had to choose, like what most immediately pops up is my long meandering walks that I take every day, even in the winter.
Oh wow, you're
It
brave. You're in Chicago. That's very brave.
Yeah, you're just, I think, built differently when you've lived through these winters for a long time.
I
And
see.
yeah, my long walks where I just get to, take in the trees and the wind blowing through the canopy of the trees, like that just really centers me in a way that keeps me, in my body and
Yeah.
uh, in alignment with, a level of peace amidst disorientation.
Disorientation is a good word for what's going on. So I was telling Veronica before we hit record that even though I have a long list of like interviews that are lined up for the podcast, I really wanted to prioritize this and publish it as soon as possible because you're so right. The general consensus is like overwhelm and blah blah blah, and everybody has an opinion. Everybody's entitled to an opinion, but when we're online and when we're around people, when we're at the supermarket, when we're doing day-to-day lives, and we're seeing scarcity, we're seeing fear, we're seeing all that, it will affect us. It doesn't matter how resilient we are. Like the whole idea of like you're resilient and you're not supposed to be affected, that's bullshit. We're all one organism in some form or another. We're all sharing an
Mm,
experience, right? So I found myself feeling overwhelmed yesterday. And I was like,
mhm.
oh, okay, you need to stop right here, put your phone down, and go for a walk. And I went for a long walk. I sat under a tree, even though it was cold. And I was like, okay, I feel more grounded. So, what I love about the work that you do, I love your Instagram, by the way. It's just so nourishing. It's like a, I don't know, like it's very centering, very grounding. And the work that you do is very unique and different. So tell us about the work that you do and how you teach somatic healing in a very different way. What's your story? What led you to that?
Yeah. Okay. So when you ask about my story, I'm going to throw it way, way the fuck back
Go.
and start with being a little girl, actually, and having this like innate love and fascination and reverence for the female body, in particular for women. I was like this teeny tiny midwife. I loved hearing birth stories. I loved hearing my mom tell her birth stories. And I loved, learning about rites of passage, feminine rites of passage, like menarche, our first period. And um, I went on to discover that that was a pretty unique experience, that most of my peers had been raised in an environment and where they were discouraged to connect to their body, and especially the female body in particular had been stigmatized, objectified, right, deemed something we don't talk about. It's a secret, right, when we get our period. And that in combination with my my own trauma, my developmental trauma from childhood and other experiences, it really gave me this unique experience of
Mhm.
I love bodies. I I could dork out about them all day, and I'm experiencing symptoms in my own body that, show me inherently that my reactions to life are being driven from within my body, that the stories in my mind are only an abstraction of what is actually going on inside. And so in college, I remember going through this big breakup and telling my friend at the time, like, I just can feel that my reaction to this deep heartbreak is coming from my body, and I didn't have the language for it. Nobody was
Wow.
talking
No one was talking about that back then. Yeah.
Nobody was talking about somatics, but I knew it. And so it felt like I was always trying to do what I'm doing now.
Mhm.
There was like this path, this trajectory that I was on that I didn't really know until all of a sudden here I am, and Waking Womb was born. So I, have been in somatics under some, modality for the last 16 years. But when I discovered polyvagal theory, thanks to Dr. Stephen Porges, somatic experiencing, I completed the 3-year training by Dr. Peter Levine. So much of what I was saying in college felt validated. I was like, this is what I've been trying to say.
Mhm.
And, in my own trauma resolution journey, I realized like nobody is centering the unique needs of the female nervous system. I had a background in birth work and holistic pelvic care and menstrual cycle embodiment, and nobody was bringing that to the forefront, even in my formal 3-year education.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I'm really passionate about that and did my own research, and then also a training with Dr. Kayla Osteroff, who is closing the gender gap in research. She's amazing.
Nice.
And my methodology is this integration of, everything I've learned and the research we finally have on the female nervous system, because we experience trauma differently and we heal trauma differently. So
Oh, yeah. I
that's kind
can't
of the
wait.
gist of it.
Yeah, I want to get into that in a minute. I love everything that you said. I also noticed because I'm in the SCP training as well at the moment, and I also noticed that, and I've heard Kimberly Ann Johnson say the same thing. She is also a body worker, a sexologist, and all that stuff. She also mentioned the same things that you said, that the female nervous system wasn't completely covered in the SCP training. And that's not to say, there's anything. I think SCP training is amazing. It's just,
Oh,
there are,
incredible.
it's incredible, right? Like you should see me, after the 4 days, every night I come back to my husband. I'm like, oh my God, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, I don't know what you're saying, but it sounds amazing. I'm so happy you're happy. And it's just like on this high for 4 days. I'm about to start my intermediate year actually in 3 days, on Friday. Yeah, it's really, really exciting. One thing I really love that you do not address, or you do not use the traditional acronym CPTSD. You only say
Hmm.
CPTS. You drop the D, which stands for disorder. And when I saw
Yeah.
that, I was like, I love this chick. Tell us more about like the story of dropping that and why stress is not a freaking disorder. Thank you.
No,
I'm
it is
just
perfectly, yeah, a little heated up there. I love it. Yeah. Yeah. So one of the most remarkable experiences I had in my own trauma resolution journey was this realization as I mapped my own nervous system that my reactions that seemed disproportionate to what was going on were in fact really healthy signs that my nervous system was working exactly as it was meant to.
Yeah.
And so it opened up this experience, this completely new experience in my body of really feeling compassion for myself, compassion where compassion was not available when I was only orienting to my reactions to life that seemed, so enormous compared
Mhm.
to what was happening, right? There was before that a lot of shame, a lot of shaming myself, a harsh inner critic. But when I learned that my body was doing its job, I was like, fuck yeah. Like I able to connect to compassion inherently because of that. And so I think if we can reorient this over identification I see in people all the time of like, well, I have generalized anxiety disorder.
Disorder.
Yeah. In reality, that word is so stigmatizing and shaming. And then we over identify with it and it becomes a part of our personality. We think that this is just who we are. It's a permanent
We're
part of us.
disordered.
Yes. And
Mhm.
in reality, guess what? That anxiety is your body's way of getting your attention to say, hey, there's something here to feel that you're not feeling. And that anxiety is actually going to be one of your deepest allies in your healing journey. And so, if we
Mhm.
can reorient to what we call disorders as instead nervous system responses, it frees up so much of the shame and stigmatization. And then also this attachment to like, I think over time, it's like, I need my anxiety to feel like myself. And it's not just anxiety. I'm talking about all this depression, even physical symptoms, chronic pain. We can easily over identify with them and also feel ashamed about them. So just kind of untangling those
Mhm.
associations by dropping the D, I think is, one step forward. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. So, my personal history, as I shared with you a minute ago, like before we hit record or even after, I grew up in Jordan and it was in the 80s. And like speaking of stigmatizing the female body, like that was I don't know, like I felt ashamed when I got my
Mhm.
period. I'm not
Mhm.
Muslim, but the general culture in Jordan is Muslim, and my Muslim friends would be told that they're not even allowed to pray when they're on their periods because, it makes them unpure. Right. And I
Mhm.
feel like I felt so dirty when I had my period because that was the cultural, kind of belief. And then on my healing journey, on my resolution journey, and all that now I live in the US, I lived in Australia before that, in France, blah, blah, blah. I never identified as somebody that carries so much shame around my gender, around my body, around my breasts, around having a butt, around having a period, around having a female voice, not like a tough male voice. Because back in Jordan, you needed to be the least feminine possible to be safe.
Mm.
Like when went to uni, I would go in a bus, public transport, and I needed to dress like a man. I needed none of my female contours to show, just to be
Mm.
safe and speak like a man and swear like a man. So everybody just leaves me the fuck alone. And these layers of shame are just so like they're shedding, they're going away, but it was just so what's the word? Like confronting how much
Mhm.
shame I carry. Even
Hmm.
though like I didn't think so, but the layer of shame is just there. It's crazy.
It is just there. It's so pervasive and insidious
Mhm.
that oftentimes it's kind of baked into our sense of self. I think if it's
Yeah.
been there from a young age, coming at us from so many different layers, like there's just unfortunately this sense of self being shaped by shame.
Yeah.
And so I fully understand that. And I see my clients struggle with shame. I actually in my programs make sure I spend a robust amount of time talking about chronic shame
Yeah.
because research now that says women experience it more intensely than men.
Mhm. I
If
bet
we
yeah, we do. I bet we do. Yeah.
and it's yes, it's very cultural, of course. We're inundated with messages from the patriarchy to devalue ourselves, devalue our body, our experience in the world. And there are physiological markers of how we experience shame differently. So in the female nervous system, we are disproportionately impacted by the ventral vagal system, by the
Mhm.
social nervous system. And because we evolved as a human species beyond just the dorsal or sympathetic response through mammalian bonding. And mammalian bonding happened primarily through mother-baby bonding in
Mhm.
mammals.
Mhm.
And so our bodies, women's nervous systems, are impacted more by things like estrogen. We have more estrogen. Our nervous system regulates more through oxytocin, which are both pro-social hormones. Uh, and so we have this hyper attunement typically to, do I belong or not belong here?
Yeah.
Which, if you get stuck in the, oh, I don't belong here, at some point, shame is going to flood your sense of self. And, that leads to perfectionism and all these other
Mm.
things. So, yeah, I'm so
Yeah.
glad you.
Yeah, well, the other thing that I had shame around is my anger. So my coping mechanism, I don't like that word. The way that I survived my father and the way that I survived my culture back in Jordan was by being angry, by being scary, right? Because I'm short and I'm small, but I thought that, well, I believed, and it worked, that the louder I am, the more masculine I am, the more angry I am. And masculine and angry are not the same thing, but like by being like rough and also angry, that's how my parents would listen to me. That's how the Arabs, the Arab men around me would not say, oh, she's just a woman. So I had a lot of shame being angry because that is my
Mm.
default. I did not have access to grief for so long, even though I have a lot to be to be really sad and mad about. But I think until 2022, that's when the floods of my grief opened, and like from like 40 years or so. But my go-to is always anger, and that was something I had a lot of shame about. And when I started my business in 2020, I showed up as the good girl. Like I made sure that no one knew that I loved like the way I am, and I was really really like sweet and nice and fluffy online. And that's not me. That's another layer of shame that I had to shed, of like, no, I'm not cute,
Mm.
but I presented as cute to cover the anger, or like the fact that I am angry when I see, or not angry, but I get aroused or activated when I see people, when I see inequality with money, when I see, the way that I work with money, it's irrelevant now, but it activated things in me, but I would repress it because of my shame. That's such a big
Mm.
thing, and I'm just happy to talk about it here because I'm sure other people also feel this way in at work, where they might revert to one kind of emotion and not the other because of that shame. Maybe it's with women, I feel like it's more being like nice and docile versus the anger. So I'm not usually the norm, but anyway, yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think that you bring up a really good point that, like, our nervous system will strategize in these highly adaptive
Oh yeah.
ways. Doesn't really care, what we want to be like. It's those protective mechanisms just kick in automatically.
Hmm.
And they're all really intelligent, right? If we like just kind of pause for a moment and
Oh yeah.
recognize, wow, that is so genius and brilliant of my system to go like, oh, it's not safe to feel your grief. I got you. Here's some fight response, right? Like we're gonna just ride this one out.
Hmm.
Um, and the deeper you go, the more you kind of unpack those layers and de-shamify all the emotions, because shame is such a binding experience. It's
Right.
not
Mhm.
necessarily an emotion, it's this physiological response that goes, is it safe to express anger, or is it not safe? And depending on what we've been taught and
Mhm.
our genetic predisposition, what we inherited from our ancestors is really going to shape that. So, yeah.
Yeah, so true. Like a lot of times, helping people with money basically can look like helping people access their anger, because that's my now that I've owned it, now that I've released the layers of shame, I own it and I know how to use it in ways that are more aligned versus how I would rage endlessly
Yeah.
before, right? Because that endless rage has already been kind of like released and gone, and now I feel more, I feel good when I'm angry in a good way. Not like, that sounded weird.
Um,
You know what I mean, right? Like anger makes me feel like, yes, it's okay. It's no longer anger. It's become life energy. That's it.
Right. Life force energy. It's what gives
Hmm.
us our power. And I'm not, this is very much Kimberly Ann Johnson's like zone of genius.
Hmm.
And I always feel the need because people often will be like, oh, you're like Kimberly Ann Johnson. And I'm like, I am. And I was very much on this path before I discovered her.
I
So
get it. Yeah, yeah.
uh, um, when I discovered her book, The Fourth Trimester, I had been working in somatics, doing body work and birth work, and she did teach me a lot
Hmm.
about befriending anger. And what I found was that that was a major piece of the puzzle. I needed my anger in order to go into the terror in my body and feel like I had the
Oh.
power to process it. I needed my anger and rage to go into the layers of intense shame without getting lost in it, right? It's like I really see it
Yeah.
as part of me that holds my hand through other layers that, I think normally I was completely dissociated from.
Mm.
And because there was so much freeze and fun in my system, like a lot of women, and I also have clients like yourself who that default to a fight response is there, and it's such an intelligent adaptation. And I'm always curious about like, with my clients, there's a lot of needing to complete this circuit of fight. Like, well, let's move that anger. Let's,
Hmm.
um, complete self-protective responses
Yeah.
so that it's not stuck on repeat all the time.
Hmm. Yep, yep, definitely. So I can talk about anger. However, I really do want to be mindful about the talking about the key differences from your perspective between the male and the female nervous system and the way each, I mean, these are, but there are way more genders than that. However, I just want to talk about how the female nervous system is different, from birth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. And I want to name that, I realize that there are people who identify in, various ways, whether you're in
Mhm.
the trans community. And I aim to be as inclusive about that as possible. And it's
Yeah.
important for me to use the word woman. That is how I identify. Um, but one of the key differences I sort of already named, which is that we are more impacted by the social nervous system naturally. We
Mhm.
have oxytocin and estrogenous cycles that give us a biological need for connection and safety, and we regulate through that.
Mhm.
So, if you think about evolutionarily, women are built to have babies, whether we want babies or not. That is there in our physiology.
Mhm.
And when you are pregnant postpartum, if we look at this through the lens of like when we were living outside, when we were living in caves, that puts us in a really vulnerable position. We need
Yeah.
our tribe to us, right? When we're pregnant, we need people to protect us, to bring us food, and tend to our wounds, right? Tend to us in labor, and so that drive is there. And one of the main ways that we regulate is through connection and through co-regulation.
Mhm.
And it doesn't mean that we don't have strategies in our attachment system that cause us to react to connection differently. That's very much there too. And so
Yeah.
it's very worth your while to heal that. Um, and that doesn't mean that men don't have it. We're just more impacted by it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And we live in a very dopamine centered world. So,
Do we?
dopamine.
What? Hang on. What's going on? Squirrel? Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So these are, the dopamine hits that we get from doom scrolling, from
Mhm.
checking off our to-do list, from going, productivity for productivity's sake.
Yeah.
And dopamine supports male physiology. It supports the male nervous system. So we're living in a world that supports male physiology, but dopamine actually prevents us from having adequate amounts of oxytocin, which is our main regulator. So dopamine actually lowers oxytocin. This is all based on the work of Dr. Kayla Ostroff. If anyone's interested in the research, if
I
you ask
am,
me,
yeah.
yeah, research is amazing, and I love it when it aligns what we already knew. Um, so in a dopamine centered world, one of the best things you can do is look at your schedule and go, where am I living a very dopamine driven life? And how can I lower those dopamine hits, slow down, and increase oxytocin, which is that experience of pleasure in the body and especially pleasure in connection, whether that's pleasure in connection with ourselves
Mhm.
through touch, through movement, through music, through walking outside, through cuddling with our cats, or touch with another human being, hugs, talking, co-regulating, dancing together, moving together,
Yeah.
making love, all these ways that we know we can increase oxytocin and therefore support the female nervous system.
Mm.
Um, I'll start there. There's a lot more to
I know,
add.
me too. I'm like, whoa, which road am I taking? There's a lot of forks here. Okay. Wow. I love that so much. It validates a lot of things that I've been thinking about as well, especially from thinking about we're living in a capitalist world and it's becoming more and more and more overwhelmingly, increasingly overwhelming and prominent.
Uh,
And given all that, how do we take care of ourselves and each other in
mm,
these times? And, given that base knowledge
mhm,
for
mhm.
now. Yeah.
Are you asking, just to clarify, more
Mhm.
so women or for everybody?
Mm, so let's go with women for now.
Yeah. I think that one of the best ways we can really create more safety for all of our women is to practice what I call womb co-regulation. So
Mm,
co-regulation is when two or more nervous systems find safety by being together. It's baked into our physiology. It's encoded in our muscles and our tissues to have that experience. And in a hyper independent world, we are starved for it. We're touch
yep.
starved. Um, Lonely, loneliness is a huge epidemic. And for women, womb co-regulation is our body's longing, to bleed together, to birth together, human babies, and what we're co-creating, kind of like what we're doing now.
Mhm.
We really yearn for that on a physiological level, whether we're conscious of it or not. And in the programs and groups that I lead, I'm never not in awe of what that missing piece brings to women. This
Wow.
experience of witnessing each other, midwiving each other through rites of passage, whether it's our monthly cycle, whether it's motherhood or creating a business or perimenopause, menopause, we're really missing out on the eldership we used to get from women kind of holding our hand through these embodied rites of passage. And I think that's huge. There's so much that we're uncovering about what happens uh, in our cycle, not just from like a cycle syncing
Yeah,
biohacking.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
not
And
really,
that's not what we're talking about here. Yeah.
no, but to our actual nervous system in terms of sympathetic and parasympathetic dominance, heart rate variability, that needs to be considered in trauma resolution and really in any modality. I mean, one of the things I always say is like, make sure your providers are asking you where you're at in your cycle. And
Mhm.
it's maybe not that shocking to hear this, but most providers are not asking women these questions. And then we're throwing modalities at women that are based on us having one universal nervous system, the male nervous system. And then we wonder, why do women have such high rates of, reproductive health issues? We make up 80% of the population that has autoimmune disease.
That says a lot. That's data.
Yes, much higher rates of anxiety, depression. So um, making sure that we ask each other and that our providers are asking us, where are you at in your cycle, on your perimenopause journey, postpartum, whatever it is. And that really, we always ask women if they're pregnant. Why aren't
Yeah.
we asking where, if they're bleeding or not? Like that matters.
I think so too. I had a pap smear 2 years ago that was right after my cycle, and the results came as irregular, and I'm like, "I know, I told you I'm on day 7. You didn't listen to me. I didn't wanna do it." They're like, "Oh, you gotta come back," and of course, they drop the C word. As soon as you drop the C word, I stop listening, and I go, and I get all this, like, long procedure for them to tell me, "I think we took your sample too close to your cycle." And I'm like,
Told
"That's
you.
a month of my life stressing and over $1,000 of okay, told you, exactly, like, why didn't you ask me? You're a gynecologist, ask me these questions
Yes, ask women and believe them.
and believe them." Oh my god, exactly. I when I'm really heated up, there are words in Arabic that just come out, and I was nearly gonna say I've been, like, out of Jordan for 20 years, and it's like, بالضبط, exactly, yes.
I
So
feel
funny.
that. I don't know what it means, but I feel it.
It's like, so we know that nervous system regulation shows up as physical symptoms. What
Mhm.
physical symptoms or physical effects do you commonly see in women you work with, and how can we work with the nervous system to hack them? I'm kidding. To help resolve them. I'm joking, hack.
The funny word. Yeah. So the common physical symptoms that I see are, a lot of my trauma manifested in cycle symptoms that no doctor
Mhm,
could explain. I had premenstrual dysphoric disorder. That's one that I see a lot, or PMS. Yeah,
mhm,
mood
mhm.
swings.
Same.
Primarily considered like, oh, this is a hormonal issue because a hypermasculine approach to the body says everything is separate in categories and not related. In a feminine approach to life, to embodiment, we see that everything is related and connected, and that there's more continuity in the body versus separate and isolate, right?
Mhm,
And so what I found was that in healing my cycle symptoms, the PMDD, the debilitating pain, pelvic pain, menstrual pain, gut health issues. I was handed birth control that made everything worse for me. I couldn't take it. And this was in like college, this was a long time ago. I was always looked at weird for not taking the pill. Like it just felt like everybody else could take it. And I was like, I physically feel ill and like I'm going insane when I'm on the pill. So I couldn't take it. Turns out years later, we find out all of this research on how the pill is really working against us. I won't go down that rabbit hole, but it's,
not today.
look, it really wasn't until I applied both somatic trauma resolution and what I knew about my cycle and the needs of my physiology that things started to shift.
Mhm.
And so this is something that I am very focused on, but I also work closely with women who have pelvic floor pain and dysfunction,
Mm,
typically from trauma. And a lot of the time it is from sexual boundary violations, which is, another area of specialty that I focus on. And our pelvic floor, it really needs to be included in our embodiment. So many of us are dissociated from it. So those would be two that stand out. But like I said, women are suffering at a much higher rates from many different symptoms. So there's like a wide variety. Yeah.
yeah, I feel like I actually went through many of the things that you mentioned with PMDD and a lot of stuff, but it really helped me doing being on a somatic healing journey. You're talking, and I'm like, actually, where did these things go? Oh yeah, it's because I started
Oh,
down that
yeah.
route.
Yeah. And like if we look closely, I won't get too specific about this, but if we look closely at the autonomic nervous system
Hmm.
and our reproductive system, the our reproductive health is going to be impacted by unprocessed trauma. It just will, because at the center of all systems of the body is the nervous system, determining where our energy is going to go. Is it going to go towards survival because
Yeah,
of unprocessed trauma, or can it go towards the health and wellness of all the other systems? And that includes our reproductive system, which we are impacted by greatly. And there's finally research, right, that shows what we already knew. A lot of us women already knew that trauma very much leads to reproductive health issues, endometriosis, PCOS, infertility, things like that. And it's such a
Yeah.
missing piece of the puzzle that no doctor that I know of is telling their clients who are struggling.
Yeah, what a shame. How sad, right? Like I've seen
Mhm.
so many friends and people close to me struggling through PCOS and being told you just need to suffer through it or go on birth control or
Mhm.
without yeah. It's just heartbreaking, right? It's heartbreaking.
It is, and it also, lights a fire inside of me to really change that and,
Mhm.
spread this information. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So, as you probably know, my work centers around helping clients regulate their nervous systems around finances and all that stuff. And we've got patterns such as overspending and being too strict with money,
Mhm.
not many people talk about this being too strict with money as being like not a great thing, right? Or getting into cycles of debt. It typically relates to nervous system regulation or dysregulation and trauma. Let's talk about that. And I feel like we need to start with how social media is pretty much trivializing. That's another word I need to say very, very gently, trivializing healing work, especially when it comes to money.
Yeah. Wow. I really believe that. I think it's so watered down and diluted in, especially like manifestation culture. It's just
Fuck
they're
that.
just
I
cheap.
know.
It's like, oh, just think this way and poof, magic happens. When in reality, if you have trauma, which we all do in your nervous system, you can't override that shit. It is there and it is governing how you respond to your money. I came from poverty. I came from a lack of resources in my childhood. And there was so much work I had to do to excavate my identity around that. Because when you're stuck in a freeze response around money or a fawn response around money, you literally, I mean, the story I was telling myself, Nadine, my whole 20s was this is just my lot in life. Like I'm just gonna be poor, but I'm gonna love my work, and I'm gonna be poor but happy. And I mean, that version of myself, if she could see me today, would be like, whoa, I was so wrong.
Yeah.
Um, and I wish more people knew that it goes so much deeper than like, fluffy affirmations.
Well, now there's like adding to the affirmations, nervous system somatic work, like do this so that you can do that. It's just so
Oh my God, it gets nuts. It's like push this button to get rid of that feeling, and
uh,
then you're regulating. That is not what we're doing, people. Like that is not. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say that. It's a version of somatics that you will plateau with because regulation is
it's a
not.
good
Let
way of
me.
putting it. Yeah. You will plateau, right? You will plateau with that because it's not going to the root of what's going on. And not everyone can take you to the root.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
because someone says they can, it doesn't mean they should because we cannot go to the trauma into the eye of the trauma. That's not how we navigate trauma, especially
Mm-mm.
when it comes to something that is so related to survival and security and
Mhm.
worth. And like you said, our identity. Money is just it's I feel like I'm very lucky or blessed or whatever that whatever. I don't think lucky or blessed are good words for it, but my trauma really came in the guise of like financial abuse. That's why I
Mm.
went very deep into money and why I say I'm lucky or whatever. It's because I can artfully navigate icky, hairy money stuff with such sensitivity and compassion because I've been through it all. But what I cannot stand to see is how people that come from a completely different background, that have completely different money story to you, tell you, just do this, babe. And you're like, I am, it's not working. And then people come to me in the end, they're like, I spent all this money on this program it's working for everyone, but not for me. What's wrong with me? So not
Mhm.
only are they out of pocket and probably in debt, but they are riddled with self-doubt when they have entered it under the guise of like, this is going to take away all my financial worries and I'm going to sustain and I'm going to feed my family. And people have taken like second mortgages to do that sometimes.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
heartbreaking.
That is heartbreaking. And unfortunately, I see a lot of people making money off of other people who are falling for that. And there really needs to be more consciousness around this conversation because it's such a vulnerable place to be,
Yeah.
too. You really have to hold it with tenderness. So I really appreciate your approach.
Yeah. So, with with a female nervous system, or to those of us who menstruate, it can really impact or influence our money habits at different points throughout the cycle. For example, me, on days 13 to 16, I can spend thousands of dollars. Like, if I don't stop myself, I could just spend and spend and spend. But at other parts of my cycle, I'm more like, do not spend any money. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah, that's so fascinating. I mean, I often feel like even my attachment style changes with each cycle too. Like
Yeah, yeah,
sometimes I'm like,
definitely.
come here, and sometimes I'm like, ah, yeah, leave me alone. Um, yeah, I think that's really interesting, especially because women have been given so many stories about how we need to be around money, whether it's like uh you can't make money, you're a woman,
Hmm.
you're meant to be smaller than your man, or we have to be hyper masculine with our money and have rigid control and be like work ourselves
Yeah.
to death to earn specific amounts of money. And I think that from a nervous system perspective, when there's regulation, there's like a circuitry. Money can flow, right? Just like our cycle, when we embody it, it flows and we're flowing with it. And so I wish more women knew that they can harness the powers of their cycle to co create a relationship with money that is abundant, that is flowing, that is moving. It's not, these really polarized, like, I'm going to make a bunch of money and spend it all because my idea of how much I should have is less,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Story. Or, yeah, I've totally been the person who can afford what they're about to pay for at Target, but I have it programmed in my head from being poor when I was little that I have to like remove a few things. And I'm like,
Right.
what?
Yeah.
I can afford this. Why am it's just this habit I have of like, got to take some stuff out because I'm not supposed to spend this much. Um, when in reality, that's sort of like really limiting myself and keeping myself adhered to this story of, yeah, scarcity.
Yeah. Mm. I have so much to say about that. Shit. So much to say about that. Like, my mind went here and then here. And yeah, like just having that blueprint of scarcity. And another thing that I wanted to say is that I'm really gonna miss my period when it's gone in menopause. Like, so many people, especially,
I feel the
sorry,
same way. And
you
I
feel?
think it's more rare to feel that way. Like
Yeah.
when I tell people, my mom friends or whoever is like that, I just got my period. They're like, oh, and I'm like, no,
Like,
this
no.
this is a cleansing. I'm celebrating because I'm no longer, in late luteal, which is a whole ride. And so I really appreciate you saying that this is something I'm gonna miss too. And I'm like
Yeah.
preemptively like, oh wow, it's gonna be a whole thing. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
So many of my friends that are in like their postmenopause, they're like, "Oh, it's freedom." Like, but I'm
right.
gonna really miss it. Like it's my friend. It's like I don't know how to explain it. It's like me and my period are buddies. I don't know.
Bodies. And what's really amazing is that women, postmenopausal women, still experience like cyclicality, the fluctuations.
Oh.
And the theory behind that is that because our nervous system is so familiar with that pattern, even though we're not ovulating and bleeding, it's still there.
Mm.
Isn't that beautiful?
Now I'm having a wave of grief for what's coming in the next 10 years. Yeah.
No, no.
Yeah, I mean, I've been working with a perimenopause coach, and it's been wonderful. And she's really helped me kind of like just befriend my period. And it's been like the past 2 years have been just so nice to be in sync with it,
Mhm.
and my creative projects and my like wealth projects and all of that. It's just I'm gonna miss that. So just a moment of grief.
I had a lot of grief come up when I encountered cycle embodiment and, the wisdom that we've, sort of oriented to collectively in the last 10 to 15 years around like, actually, this is a whole part of our physiological rhythm that's been
Mhm.
ignored. I was like, nobody, not a single person was telling me that I needed to adjust how I live with each cycle. And so once I was finally doing it, it was so healing. And I was like, just hit with so much grief
Yeah.
around and anger around like, I never got to experience this, until now. And it's never too late, but I still had a lot to feel around that. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's talk about emotions, since emotions are tied to everything, like even money, especially money. I am very surprised by how rare, maybe I've seen it 3 times ever, how rare money coaches, financial coaches, whatever, they do not provide emotional education. And
Mhm.
90% of our finances is emotional, right?
Oh,
So the mainstream perspective with emotions, it involves acting out our emotions, raging
yeah.
or crying and all that stuff. How is that different to feeling our emotions, and why might simply acting out an emotion keep someone stuck?
Yeah, this is such a nuanced conversation. I love it. So, for a long time, because of trauma, I was highly dissociated from my body. At the same time that I was dissociated, I knew that underneath dissociation in the nervous system, your system is using dissociation or numbness to take you out of your body, not just to take you out of it, but because there's so much to feel
Too
there. There's
much.
so much, yeah, that your body's like, all right, let me help you out so you can function. We're just gonna, leave the body. And I would occasionally cry my fucking eyes out. I would just cry and cry and cry. And yet I wasn't feeling anything. And some of you are going to hear this and be like, wait, what? So let me break it down. You can be emoting a lot, intensely, outrageously, and still not be feeling your feelings. It is very much a way for your nervous system to cope,
Mhm.
uh, to keep you from feeling, actually. So my tears were distracting me from what I actually needed to feel. I see it in my clients too, where I'm like, if there's constant crying, I'm not saying don't cry. Please do not. I am a crier. I love crying. Please cry
Crier
when,
here too. Love crying.
and if it's your default, if it's what you go to, even when you're angry, even when you're frustrated, irritated, afraid, I mean, I could go on and on. Typically, this is your nervous system going, let me take you out of the feeling by creating this parasympathetic release through your tear ducts. And it can feel like, oh, I'm feeling so much health, and crying is good for you, it's healthy, but we're not feeling anything in our body and nothing is being digested. That all stays the same under the surface. There's all of this charge. You're just temporarily discharging through the eyes a little bit.
Mhm.
And so there's a big difference, right, between acting it out and actually feeling the sensations in your body. And what will happen is you'll feel them. And when you have the capacity to feel them, they activate and they deactivate. There is a rising and a decline. right? It's not going up, 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 up till we explode and we're no longer feeling it. That's, I guess, how I would explain the difference. I could talk way more about that, but yeah.
Yeah, this is a very important, as you said, nuance, because a lot of people are like, just feel your feelings and all that. I mean, I get that,
Yeah, yeah.
but there is a difference in the quality of the journey of feeling your feelings. And also trust your body. Don't feel like I'm not saying there are certain practices that force you to
Right.
feel more than you have capacity for, and that can cause re-traumatization.
It really can. And yet we might be so dissociated in that re-traumatization that we don't know we're being re-traumatized. And then we wonder why down the line our symptoms come back.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I know. So, just to wrap up, mm, I guess, like, I feel like what I would like people to take away from this really rich conversation, pun intended, haha, but for real, is I know that we're all going through a lot right now, and not just nationally, but on a global scale. And I feel like, just from what you were saying and what I've learned from you over the past, hour or less, is community is important. What else?
Mhm.
What should we prioritize right now instead of doom scroll? Sometimes, what should we prioritize right now, especially in these times?
Yeah, I think just because the world around you is becoming increasingly disorienting doesn't mean you can't do the inner work to find a sense of orientation that keeps you. You don't need to be all blissed out and happy, but at least have a sense of connection to yourself, a connection to okayness
Mhm,
is something to strive for right now. It's not selfish to do the inner work to have that amidst the chaos. We actually need more people who can embody that,
mhm.
because that has a ripple effect in your communities. When you show up with that sense of okayness amidst all the disorientation, you invite other people into being okay as well.
Yeah.
We don't have to feed off of each other's reactions. You're not obligated to feel overwhelmed, stressed, afraid. These are all welcome feelings. And what I see is like, oh, I have to react. I'm morally obligated to react to show that I belong. When
Mm,
in reality, you don't. You get to feel exactly how you feel, even if what you feel is okay. And you get to feel not okay. But what I see is a lot of people assuming that because I'm in this certain social circle, I need to be freaking out right now. Doesn't mean that I don't get hit with freaking out from time to time, but it's important to me to show up in my communities able to have that ripple effect of co-regulation. And so I don't stay stuck in the freak out.
yeah, I agree with you. The image that I had yesterday was like everybody is like inside of a wave, and we're either, if we don't take care of ourselves and make sure that we're strong enough to swim, we're gonna sink. And if we sink, everybody can,
Yeah.
no one, like, we're helping nobody. But if we build our resilience and make sure we're okay and get on a raft, this way we can build a raft that's big enough for everybody to
Mhm.
get on with us, right? No one is gonna benefit from us sinking. Everybody's gonna benefit from us floating and persevering. So, yeah.
Yeah. I'm having a flashback right now to the Titanic when she lets him fall, and I'm definitely on team. Like he could have gotten on.
I saw, like, there's a meme that circulates of like her and her dogs, and like, sorry, there's no space here on the raft, babe. Like, that's
Dogs.
me.
Oh my God. Yeah. No, I was stated by that, and yeah. So, but thank you for that image, because it's so true. We can't just let ourselves sink, and it's okay if we do a little bit, but doing the work
Yeah.
to, yeah, come up and build that raft is so worth it for yourself first and foremost, but everyone around you too.
Yeah, and our little giggle actually made me want to say that, laugh, humor. Humor is not insensitive in these times. Put on stand-up comedy, put on like the old 90s kind of like that slapstick kind of style of humor. Put it on, laugh for half an hour, 20 minutes. It will do so much for you. Last night we put dinner on, and then I told my husband, like, I'm gonna go to bed after dinner. I just feel so heavy. And we put something on that made me laugh, and I'm like, let's watch another episode, and then let's watch another one. And I started laughing, and I actually had really nice dreams, and I woke up feeling really resilient, and I held much better space for my clients this morning. And it's so important to take care of ourselves in these little ways and eat well, exercise well, get your fresh air, take care of yourself. We are doing no one a service by doom scrolling, or we can't change anything, but we can actually create small changes in our community. And by community, that might only mean your family, right? Or you and your pet, whatever it is, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Keep shining on Instagram. Thank you for all the work that you do. Of course, I will be. Oh, before we go, tell people what you have going on and tell people about your offerings. I'm sure everybody's curious.
Love to. So we're now enrolling people in my 10-week and year-long program continuously. So when you
Nice.
start, get the full amount of live classes that you would need to complete my programs in Soma School. And this is all centered around somatics for the female nervous system. So, there are other teachers like me, but we're very far, there's not very many of us. Somatics is primarily based on the male body. So if you would like to learn about your actual nervous system and how we heal trauma with more complexity, then Soma School is open. We'd love to hear from you. You can book a free exploratory call with me on my website. And come follow me at Waking Womb on Instagram.
I will link all that below. You also have a retreat coming in Arizona, right?
Yeah, the retreat in Arizona is full, but we have another, the Kripalu Institute in May on the female nervous system. So check that out. Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Well, I will link all this in the show notes. Again, thank you so much for coming on the Unfuck Your Money show. Thank you everyone for listening, and I'll see you next time.